Coming off the moon and the soil in the earth, breaking through the rocks, growing wild and tall till the buds begin to pop. So pack me in a bowl or roll me in a spliff. While you're breaking me down, you can feel your fingers stick.
Welcome to The Smoking Spot, a really good podcast about weed. I'm Ryan Herron in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Amanda Breeze in Toronto.
And we're here this week on the pink couch talking with the founder of Crop Circle Chocolates, an Oregon edible brand that's been around since the med to rec switch, basically as OG as it gets here in Oregon, and one of the companies that's really hung in there and built like a sincere following. And, I've chopped it up with these dudes in the past. They're always so genuine and so nice. When we were looking for topics that kind of hit on the production, psychoactive ingredients, good quality product type stuff, it was like, I know exactly who we need to get on the cast. So today we have the founder of Crop Circle Chocolates, Jeremiah, here to chop it up with us.
Hi, Ryan and Amanda. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Yeah, for sure, man. We're glad to have you here today. As somebody who's previously in the chocolate biz, when I came across your products, close to 10 years ago now, I was just blown away and super stoked at the quality. And since then, it's just kind of been like a decade-long process of hitting the dispensary and saying, oh, I need a few of these. Or somebody comes to town and you want to have something nice on the like medicated cheese tray, like we're going straight for your product. So we just thought we'd kind of get on here today, ask you a few questions, talk about the history of the brand and the products, and see where we go.
Great. That's exactly the type of product that we have aimed to make for Oregon since the beginning, for sure. Something that stands out on its own just through the ingredients we use and the inputs, where you can present it as like a new edible to somebody on a cheese tray at a party, or it's for like the expert user who wants to dive into strain specific edibles.
Very cool. Yeah, the thing that really attracted me early on to you guys was the fact that you were using a solventless product. You were using keef early on, and this was back in the days where everyone was just saying, "Hey, we've got all this trim, and we've got this relatively new technology. We can blast it into BHO and use some of that in our edibles or that kind of thing." So it was kind of at a time where people were, let's say, cutting corners on the sort of extracts or concentrates that went into their product. And you were always on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, oh, hey, this is a lot of extra work, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that. It was throwing back to those days. It was a bit of a gauntlet being cannabis growers and things. There were a few factors that kind of funneled us to using keef at the time. I guess simply put it, Crop Circle Chocolate is a pretty much a homegrown edible product out of Oregon. And it's evolved into a pretty sophisticated product at this point. And I guess it was to start as well, but like you're saying, there was a race to the BHO at the time, but we have been using super high quality chocolate since the beginning and creating like a French style chocolate truffle, if you will, kind of highlighting food ingredients, not just like a candy that has a flavor, but actually exemplifying and allowing the flavor ingredients, say raspberry or hazelnut, to be presented, on the outside of the truffle as well, not just in the flavor.
Oh, because they're so beautiful. Like the chocolates are so gorgeous to look at. Is the raspberry the pink plus sign? Is that the raspberry one?
So that new topper, that's an interesting segue to another style of chocolate truffle making that's pretty popular, more in like, say in the United States, where using cocoa butter on the outer shells of truffles or bonbons to trick them out with colors or whatever designs or holiday themes. So that's kind of in its own category, which we've shifted to, ironically, because of Oregon's state rules with marking edibles as serving sizes. So that what looks like a pattern on the top is actually 10 servings. And by the nature of applying the cocoa butter as the scoring marks, it ends up having kind of its own look to it, which falls into a category of what chocolatiers are kind of trying to do anyway. So that was another like lucky happenstance where we shifted from our 5 packs, which if you look at those have more of the like raspberry powder right on the top, or like some hazelnut crumbled on top, or like our almond sea salt. You'll see the sea salt right on top. So interestingly enough, by the rules of Oregon, we shifted towards making this more like Western style, fancy cocoa butter topping out of necessity, simply. And so now we kind of have both styles going.
I do like that because on both ends of the spectrum, you get the hazelnut with the sea salt. It's like a half of a hazelnut. It looks really sharp. It's from the Pacific Northwest. It's just instantly recognizable as like what we would probably call like a gourmet truffle, with the kind of place you would go into and they would have the whole glass case set up and all the truffles are in little lines and you would order them individually, and the cost is quite dear. And then on the other end, you get the stamped ones, or the however you're applying the cocoa butter dividing lines on there, in this really cool way that they have like an artsy type appearance in this that you would find in the same case. So I think that's pretty cool, like to have the elevated chocolatier style stuff in, and frankly, like a product category that we used to see, like melted down Tootsie Rolls. And the sort of things where you're like, I can't believe somebody's getting away with just like microwaving some Starburst and stirring some Fico into it and then calling it an edible brand, right? So I do have to wonder if that was a hard sell early on when you're walking into all of these, 400 new dispensaries and saying, look, I know you just got a case of melted down Starburst for relatively cheap. Do you want to take the leap and pay considerably more for a truffle that, is going to attract a different type of consumer? So was that difficult?
It sure was an interesting journey, I will say.
Okay, fair enough.
And coming back to full circle with the Keef, where we started with Keef, and using wholesome cannabis input alongside this high-end chocolate. So we were in some arenas facing like a surprising double whammy, where it was like, okay, we can accept the expensive chocolate truffle maybe not working at this location or with this dispensary as like that could be the conduit to our consumers, or is basically being the blockage to Oregon having this opportunity, because they're stuck on the price point of, well, maybe you can make an edible that doesn't have all this quality chocolate in it, so the price comes down, and that ends up being the talk early on. But we also had the Keef in there, so we would allow that to do the talking as well. And it sort of seemed like early on, I think, we learned not to take anything personal and just allow this good quality product to kind of weed out where it was going to land. And, there certainly were places that didn't understand why we would use Keef or why it would be different, which was always a fun conversation in the education arena. It was awesome to be a part of coming out of the woodwork, everybody, and starting to talk about why using Keef maybe would make a difference. I wasn't even convinced, or I was convinced as a user, and that's why we made them, but I wasn't convinced from any science necessarily early on.
Sure.
So that, eating solventless hash would make a difference from eating BHO. I didn't have anything in my back pocket to prove that was the case other than personal experience. And then gradually it feels like consumers in Oregon have done a lot of the education for their dispensary where we're at now, where it's, I feel like, largely believed that eating a full spectrum solventless hash truffle is more effective in many ways than distillate edibles.
Well, we've got this state size sample set of people with their own anecdotal evidence that says, hey, y'all, when I ate this Midsy gummy, I didn't have nearly the experience I had when I ate your truffle. And you hear that 1,000 times over the last 10 years, and you go, okay, right, we're onto something.
Exactly. Yeah. So cheers to everybody that believed in us, including you, Ryan, and the collaborations that we've been a part of, the farmers and the dispensaries that helped us with putting the best inputs the state could offer into chocolates to see that work its magic with the consumers. And it's been a fun journey, I'd say. But you're right, it was an interesting challenge to start.
Yeah, it was kind of a fun story. When some time ago, when we were just starting the dispensary up, Fidus there in Multnomah, it was very important to the guys there that if anything else went on the shelves besides their flower, the only cannabis input had to come from their garden. Which is incredibly rare. It's not the dispensary model. It's not something we've seen since then, because it is a huge pain in the ass. So we had to go and source a cartridge maker who would just use their flower to make cartridges. And our edible solution was to reach out to Crop Circle because they were producing their products in such a small batch, unique way, and legally through using metric, yeah, all through like Oregon's hoops that they had to jump through to get on the shelves. And they just really stood out as somebody who was like going the extra mile to make sure, like you said, the single source was such like a important part of your brand that it was just like a really nice connection that we could make with these guys and say, hey, look, if we send you over a little bit of flour, a little bit of keef, can we turn it into a product? And you guys were down early on. And that just says a lot about your willingness to like go that extra mile and try things to see if they work and really lean into the collabs.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Ryan, that was the first kind of specialized collab, I would say. Like we had been sourcing trim, some bee buds, if you will, from growers early on, which comes back to that initial part, the launch in Oregon, where there wasn't a lot of growers of highest quality or just in general. But so the product wasn't cheap and it wasn't necessarily super available as well. So we were kind of just working with the best we could get at the time. But this collab that you're talking about was the first that we were able to kind of get specific and start pairing up certain strains with certain truffle flavors with more intention rather than just like what's available and meeting the marketplace with its needs of like sativa versus indica. Yeah, that's going back quite a few years now, surprisingly how time flies. But that one was Quantum Kush, if I remember correctly, like an Oregon homegrown strain. And then we teamed it up with the vanilla hazelnut, being that Oregon filbert nuts are like our state nut essentially. So it was like kind of an Oregon thematic collaboration.
The breeder was from Oregon. So was the grower. So were the producers of the truffle. So were the ingredients that went into it.
Hazelnuts were from Oregon.
Right. Amanda and I always talk about giving something a sense of place, which, used to be so endemic in cannabis. You would just expect that, right? In fact,
Yeah,
most of the
exactly.
weed we got early on was like, this came from here. And that's how you knew if it was good or not. So it's interesting that we, especially with the homogenation of the strains everyone's growing, you can go to Thailand and it's apples and bananas up on the shelf. We're sort of losing that sense of place, even when the West Coast has become a focal point of the industry. It feels watered down when you can get the same strains in Michigan. So it's very cool to lean into something that is so much of Oregon.
Yeah, that was a special moment. That was like a pivotal moment for Crop Circle. And it's indicative of like how long it takes us to come out with a new flavor or a new collab. I think that was in the works ultimately for basically a year by the time that the fresh trim lined up with the packaging as, small cannabis growers and new entrepreneurs. I didn't even know I was one of those at the time. I was just, doing it. And that's led to a lot of other special collaborations over the years where we pretty much don't come out with a strain matched with a flavor at this point for any of our items that don't somehow complement each other, whether it's in the flavor profile arena or the grower collaboration. There was a pivotal moment in realizing the potential instead of just having like truffle flavors that just have a strain in it for whatever reason.
Yeah. And that's what makes it a luxury product, right? That's what makes it gourmet. I was having a chat this morning with a woman who works in weed now, but previously worked in wine. And she was kind of talking a little bit about how, 20 years ago with wines, people would go into the store and ask for a red or a white. And then through these really intense educational campaigns that a lot of different places were doing at the same time, the next time that person came in, they would say, oh, I like red wine with meat. And then the next time they would come in, they'd say, I like a Cabernet with steak. And then it was a Cab Sav with ribeye to bring out the marbling. And slowly we advanced into a place where people have that conversation when they're purchasing their wines. And so it's always exciting to hear that happening, like these beautiful pairings happening in the cannabis space. And it takes a little bit of education, I think, for people to get there. But it starts with the strains, it starts with the flavors, but it also involves, like you're saying, like the hazelnuts. Like that is so Oregon. Yeah. So that's something that people can really grasp, even if they're new to cannabis or new to edibles. Of course, they're going to want to try the local flavor.
And hey, good for all three of us for kind of representing that educational tip of the spear for weed, because I get so frustrated, that the three of us have been having these same conversations for now like 10 years. Hey, weed is really worth getting into and evaluating in the same way you would, and giving this whole like sensory evaluation of it. And the fact that so few people are still doing that can be frustrating, or that we're still introducing people to what a terpene profile is. But hey, we're getting there. We're slowly pushing it. Like, hey, the fact that, Jeremiah, you've been able to go from having keef in your truffles to now it's exclusively hash rosin, I think is a really natural evolution, and also is bringing the consumer along with you. It's like, oh, you like our products? Well, great. We're educating everyone together here on how this is that same product you like. It has those same values, but maybe it's easier to work with, or it has we can get even crazier with our strain specific. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes I got to pinch myself as to like how some of these truffle batches came to be and are coming out as a final product. Kind of like good teaching or like good music. You kind of want to like get out of the way. If you have a good lesson plan, you don't have to sit there and talk about it. The kids will learn on their own. And sort of like you're saying, Amanda, with wine, it's like, I'm sure that education campaign isn't just talking, with wine. It's like, it's over years of people getting little bits of perfect information that then correlate to something they taste, and then they evolve into liking something and this and that. And I feel like that's kind of the journey that Crop Circle's been on. And even though I'm one of the chocolatiers that makes them, myself, Jeremiah, Todd, our lead chef, my wife Rebecca has been involved over the years, and now the whole team at Bo's Knows, including Bo himself, who's been a big part of the vision, of course, of bringing the rosin component into the truffles exclusively, because the flavors are like out of this world. So we've been sort of evolving our approach with the cannabis inputs as they come to us, if you will. So sort of trying to get out of the way of trying to control like some outcome of the product, but rather being still literally wowed to this day with what we get to use. And then seeing what flavors, or, we're even veering towards less flavor in the truffles so that the consumer can taste the cannabis. The easiest example we have is the Tropicana cookies that we pair up with our orange yuzu zest truffles. Currently, we have that strain in citrus savors. which speaks to itself, which is also another orange, citrusy flavored rosin strain. We've been running the Trop cookies in that flavor for a while, including kind of the changeover from being up in Portland to moving down here to Grants Pass to work at the same facility and merge in with Bo's Nose. That flavor, most pointedly, we started using probably a third less orange and yuzu extract in the truffle because the Trop cookies just spoke through so loud with the flavor we wanted with that chocolate anyway. Rather than trying to like mask whatever is being put into edibles, we're working more towards just the flavor of the rosin speaking through as much as possible. And that's the easiest example with the orange because like those orange strains rosin just pop orange, right? So, but the difference between the Trop cookies and the citrus savers is notable because we've cut down on the orange amount. So you can taste that earthy gas more in the Trop than maybe in the citrus savers. Both of them being delightful truffles, but those little subtle nuances hopefully will help, Oregon consumers and learn more about the strains even through tasting an edible, kind of like a wine connoisseur. So that's kind of our current focus and goal in large part is really finding the strains because we have the privilege of working with Bo's Nose to dip into the vault of what we all think is going to pair up best. Like right now, our blueberry truffles are pairing really great with like cakey strains. So great cream cake and birthday cake. And there's just something about that flavor profile with blueberry that they just harmonize with each other.
Oh, yeah, I love how we've come from like trying to hide the flavor of these like seeds and stems in a box of brownie mix to now saying, oh, this Tallyman is really banana forward. So let's lean into that with some vanilla or something that really accentuates that. Man, I'm such a fan. Like I'm just drooling over here of these flavor combos.
That's also our goal. Just to have fun and have people can't stop eating these, That's why we have a 20 milligram truffle, not just 100 milligrams.
That's a high dose. That's a very generous dosage there.
That's I guess Oregon locals dose. I'm not.
Yeah, as soon as we stepped up the single milligram dosage from 50 to 100, it seemed like every brand had to be on board. It was like you better get 100 milligram up on the shelves, and it sounds like you guys recognized that was true.
We did, and that comes back to the point as well that it took us a year. We were shooting for that initial launch, but we're not going to just put something out that doesn't represent and stay organic. So it took us a minute to get those cocoa butter tops stamped on for the scoring because that was the new requirement with the 100 milligrams is they had to be scored. But once we figured that out, we're off and running now. So.
Yeah, great solution, and they're so pretty. It's such a little Instagram moment to get into the box and take a little pic of those. Great, man.
Oh, thanks.
One of my biggest complaints with pre-rolls and edibles is that it always seems to be flavor or aroma or even effect seems to be like so secondary. If I get a pre-roll and it tastes like nothing, I'm like, why did this weed get turned into a pre-roll? We could have done something else with it. So, I mean, I guess I just said like it's a little more like hats off to you guys for focusing on that and making sure the things like actually match up really well. And let's talk about how you connected with Bo's Nose and decided to like uproot everything here in Portland and move to Southern Oregon to kind of make that permanent collaboration work.
Yeah, that is a traditional hangout session early on, or several years ago now. We met up, Bo and I, here in Grants Pass at Rogue Coffee Roasters, one of the few morning hangout spots, if you will. I'll just never forget Bo being excited to taste his rosin in our truffles and the mutual respect for the approach. And even though we were using keef, and again, that was just like because that's where the industry launched, and that's how we could process to get some trichromes into our truffles in-house. Was we didn't have the capabilities at our facility at that time to make any worthy hash, if you will. So we did the dry sift and old school infusion into coconut oil, like you would make brownies at home back in the day, and strain out the keef, of course. And we're left with, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, a tasty can of butter, coconut oil, but nothing to the level of putting something like BNK rosin into the truffle. So as soon as I saw, was sitting with Bo and saw his smile and his wonder of getting to be able to taste his rosin in one of these truffles, it was no turning back from that point. We got to work pretty quick with picking out, I believe, like you brought up, Ryan, the Talimon strain was the first one we worked with. And we put that into the vanilla hazelnut. We weren't working with Fidus in the keef anymore, but we carried on the vanilla hazelnut with the Talimon, which is where those two are paired together still. It's our seasonal truffle. So you'll see those more in the fall around holiday season. But yeah, that's how it started. It was just an organic conversation of wanting to eat this edible with this solventless hash rosin. And I hadn't even considered that was an option. I don't have access to that kind of rosin. And I had just started to even dabble in consuming rosin myself. So I hadn't dreamed of such a possibility, honestly. And then as we started pairing up more and more flavors, and then the industry evolved into allowing the 100 milligram edibles across the board, that was, I guess, it was a game changer in terms of running mom and pop businesses, where it was a big potential, because now consumers can get a worthy dosage in a single or in a 5-pack. They're not, because the prices didn't change in Oregon when it went from 50 to 100. All packages remained the same price. And it was like, well, that's interesting, because we use high grade rosin, and we were crisscrossing around the state. Like there'd be times I'd talk to Bo on the phone while he's driving up to Portland and I'm driving down to Southern Oregon. And we're both small family businesses. So it was kind of time for us to team up and strengthen the potential that this edible has at that time. And now we're 2 years into 100 milligrams. And so we're purring along with making truffles just to fill the need in the state. So instead of having to navigate all these big changes that frankly felt like we're shaking out the edible industry. So that was kind of like, if we can get through this positive change, but it's creating a big, you have to invest in new packaging and we lost our single for a year, things like that. But it's a good testament to being patient if you can navigate these changes, and as it comes up in other states and whatnot, and being creative. And that's the biggest takeaway, is like, stay collaborative and you want to be in your own lane with quality and your creativity and stuff, so you don't dilute your own magic out there. But also, you can't do it alone successfully. I've learned it's just a lot stronger to team up, because you never know what positive changes or bumps in the road could come up that small businesses, I think, can make it still in Oregon, but it's harder every day maybe. And it's probably the same in other states, I imagine. So that collaboration and just believing in the quality. And since we kind of speak that same language, the Crop Circle team and the Bo's Nose team, it's like our conversations just led to kind of lifting up this product instead of being hampered by big changes and things. So, but it did, for instance, cause us to uproot our lives and move. But it's a sunny, beautiful day in Southern Oregon, so no complaints. It's been rainbow season down here. It's like, you got to be careful where you look. You might see a rainbow at any moment.
I thought you meant the rainbow family.
No. Oh, they're up in the hills, though. You'll see them around for sure.
Yeah, that's still around too. That's not a seasonal thing.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm very curious about how you experiment with creating new flavors, because you're talking about bringing the cannabis flavor to life, really making sure it shines as part of the recipe. But like, do you go through a lot of duds? Like, have you ever made a medley where you're like, oh no, that's not it?
Are
Yeah,
you just
yeah,
in
we
the
had.
freezer with a spoon, like just mouthfuls of rosin? Oh, ooh, try this blueberry muffin. Oh,
I'm gonna
yeah.
have to taste something else. That didn't work. Yeah, there are some fun duds we've hit, like working with Tallyman. We've tried to stuff that into some things that it's like, I don't know, because that is a certain profile. And I mean, we thought they were smart matchups, but they're still sitting in the R&D side of things because they could have jumped over, but they're not quite there. So a lot of it is just with these rosin terpene profiles and flavor profiles. Actually, that segues to, I think I could do a smoking spot reveal here from Crop
Ooh, I'm
Circle.
all for it.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in the process, so you can kind of experience. Ryan, you've had a taste of it from the beginning with the vanilla hazelnut, but it's a process of, sometimes we want to start a new flavor truffle. So what do we pair with that? Or sometimes we might have a certain strain of cannabis that we want to work in. So maybe that fits a flavor we have, or maybe we have to come up with a whole new flavor, which is what happened with our almond sea salt a couple of years ago. That was based on a strain, biscuits and gravy from Trap Kitchen. And that was
Yes.
like the ultimate chef's challenge, because Trap Kitchen is their chefs here in up in Portland. They have this biscuits and gravy strain, which complements their kitchen. But that's a hard thing to put into a truffle. So it was like, but they were like, chef's challenge, let's do it. And so that's where we came out with the almond sea salt. So like when you break into that truffle, it's got like a almond kind of biscuit colored center with the sea salt on top, like a biscuit. That was just kind of a visual play on the truffle, but it was great putting it out there because we'd have people be like, it tastes like something you like a biscuit. And I didn't know that it necessarily did, but it was so fun to see everybody land in different categories of why this was biscuits and gravy. And including
Oh,
myself, I realized that after completion that you could toss one of these truffles into a pot of gravy and it would be
Yes.
like amazing because there was just a little bit of dark chocolate on the outside, but some almond couverture. It wouldn't negatively affect it. Maybe it would make it more interesting.
Growing up in the South, I can say chocolate gravy is a real thing.
Yeah.
you fucking Americans. What the fuck?
I mean, yeah, we'll melt a Hershey bar into anything. You know this, Amanda. But yeah, hey, it's a real thing and it's real good. And I'm loving this. I think that's my next breakfast.
So yeah, our reveal that I'm excited with the smoking spot is that I have quasi group permission to do this with you all. That we are in the works of a coffee truffle.
You know I'm a fan of
So
this.
I
Oh
knew the two
my.
of you. I mean, it's like, wow, what timing that we're really talking about this new flavor, and I have this opportunity to talk to some connoisseurs.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad your publicist reached out when they did, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a soft reveal because we don't really know where it's going yet. And I'm going to keep it pretty top secret where we do have a component as to why we're starting this truffle, but any input now or in the future will be considered because we're just starting this. So, and this is an example of how we come up with these flavors. Is again, I try to almost just channel where it lands and see myself because there's so many different components from terpene profiles and flavors of strains to what coffee brand or company we might team up with or what type of coffee. I'm not an expert in coffee.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is, and I'm sure you guys have thought a lot about this, but Brands like Kova have that micro ground coffee, which is almost like an instant espresso sort of thing. Like, Folgers Crystals is kind of gross. It's like spray dried coffee that just instantly dissolves. But these micro ground coffees are beans that have been ground to the point that when you mix them into water, it's like at the same parts per million of something like it's a freeze dried coffee or whatever.
Oh, wow.
So it's nice. It dissolves really well. It's really easy to cook with and incorporate into your cooking. So hey, you guys run with that if you want. But I love the thought that you guys are putting into this. It's like, okay, hey, we're patient enough to make anything, to manifest any desire on the chocolate spectrum that we want. We just need to be in line with the regulations, be patient about our packaging, know that there's going to be like a couple of weeks or days of R&D that you don't really have time for because you got production going anyway. So it's cool that you guys are still leaning into coming up with new flavors and new projects. And I honestly wish more brands would see the utility in partnering with somebody, doing a cool, maybe one-off product or project. Maybe it sticks around. I mean, I wish that I'm trying to think of some cool brand. Ferrero Rocher had approached you for 420, and we were getting a bunch of $30 gilded hazelnut balls that that I had to go and chase down to some specific dispensary. I like those kind of scavenger hunt, marketing stunts, cool one-off projects. But I don't know how realistic it is for somebody that has to deal with the production and regulations.
Yeah, but that's why this sounds so exciting because like you guys are going to go to the nth degree for perfection and flavor on this. Like I'm dying to know what kind of resin. Don't say it. Don't say it. I'll wait for it to come out. I'll come to Portland, but I am intrigued.
Yeah, I am too.
Wow.
I am too. It's at that stage for sure.
It always feels that way in the weed industry anyway, right? I know that you guys have had to deal with a lot of like weird regulations, packaging changes. I know you print off a thousand labels and then it turns out that some small detail needs to be changed. So they get reprinted. I don't know how much of a headache that's actually been for you guys since you're kind of doing it yourselves. It's all DIY on your end, but I know that it's affected a lot of edible makers here in Oregon and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I am fortunate enough, but also, have lived out a bit of a hustle to be doing this ground up, I feel like. So, like a lot of people that can relate, that is a very, it's maybe time consuming to make sure, for instance, you order the right amount of something because you're not buffered to toss away packaging, if you will, for easy example. And then I think like you two could relate, or other people that maybe don't have the opportunity to buy the more expensive edible or flower, but that it typically with a small business like this, it's not to feed any kind of profit. It's just the nature of the process of something being smaller or using combined with quality ingredients that makes that price tick up a tiny bit. The domino effect of a company that thinks in that manner, or even if you're like a big company, like I can think of a couple, but spend the time doing a collaboration outside of their main bread-winning items. That to me is enough for me to try that product because I know what is involved in going to meet somebody in the industry that you want to work with and deciding that that's a family and team you do want to team up with, because as soon as you make that collaboration, it's also a risk, if you will, financially, or the outcome of the product, or who knows. When you see anybody, probably flower companies and rosin companies teaming up, there's a lot more to be said going on to create integrity and keep that old school integrity in this industry by doing those types of one-offs. Even we've been fortunate enough to just take the big leap and move right down with our main collaborator, and we're also now closer with Ananda Farms, who was one of our closest friends and collaborators in the industry as a grower here in Williams, Oregon. So being in the proximity and on the same property and facility with people we've worked with over the years that came out of just doing collaborations. The domino effect, some people listening to this that know us might be learning this for the first time, that when you buy a box of BNK Ananda chocolate truffles from Crop Circle, that there's actually like a web of community and strengthening the quality for consumers in Oregon that is sort of unspoken. But to us, every time that box lands in somebody's hands, it feels great knowing that they get that opportunity, even if they're learning that that's what's happening, and that it actually comes to fruition in a state like Oregon, where I think that's what people think of a place like this, is that those types of things are happening.
100%, because we've interviewed a couple. We met Brave a couple months ago, who's doing stuff in Oregon. We've had a few Oregonians on the podcast, and we've also had a few Canadians on the podcast as well. But as the token Canadian in the chat today, we don't do that here. That is so fucking Oregon, and everything you're saying, you're like, it's almost coming off understated, but the value of this web of building community, seeking specific quality ingredients, really creating a craft product from seed to sale, thinking of your consumer, that is so Oregon. And I want to say we don't get that everywhere. So when I hear these stories, it's like so heartwarming to know that the industry is still putting out this level of quality. I'm not saying no one here does it. It's just a rare bird. But in Oregon, I swear you guys are all on the level. You're doing it exactly the way myself as a consumer wants to see it done.
It's also nice that we have this kind of state community here because, like you're saying, they're thinking about the consumer. Well, hey, the consumer should think about the producers a little bit more because, yeah, if I buy that Ananda cultivated flower that was turned into rosin by BNK, that was turned into a truffle by Crop Circle, I'm now supporting 15 families at least, right? In some tiny way, right? And that's not how it is when you're buying most other products. Like I can buy some specific cheeses or beers or whatever in Oregon where I can go, okay, yeah, some of this money went back to the family and the producers of these things.
Right.
And it's even more rare in weed outside of flower. So it is cool to have that edible option that you can go like, oh yeah, hey, I'm very much supporting like OG Oregon traditional folks by just buying an edible, which I was going to do anyway.
Yeah. Thanks to both of your points there. Keeps me inspired.
No, we're inspired. We're the ones who are inspired here. This is so cool. I had no idea. I love hearing about this. I'm excited to come back to Oregon and scrum.
Yeah,
So
you have a load of these, yeah.
We'll make it happen for sure.
But you're gonna have to make some baby doses for me because like we're Canadians, we're low dosers. So
Sure.
100 milligrams just sounds like spiritual death, but I feel like maybe when in Oregon, who knows,
You'll like the 5-pack, the 100 milligram 5-packs where they're 20 milligrams per truffle. I was at a birthday gathering years ago and a fella there broke out his new birthday knife or something. Like it was the sharpest hunting knife. It was down here in this area. Yes. And he started shaving up the thinnest slices of the truffles because he wanted to taste them, but he doesn't consume cannabis. He can, but he doesn't, And we got him slicing 3 or 4 different flavors. And these truffles, they curl just like a thin piece of butter when you shave them. And I learned that day that putting a shaving of the truffles on your tongue is actually the way to taste it best.
Oh.
Going back to one of your podcasts I listened to, like I struggle with flavor out of context where I have a decent palate, but like if I'm going to guess a rosin flavor, I need like 3 options. Like, is it this, or this? Then I would get it right. But with all the varieties around here at this facility, I can rarely just guess which it is because even though they're wildly different, sure, citrus savors I can pretty much guess, but some real obvious ones. But any case, I'm not the best to isolate a flavor. So Amanda, when you try these, just shave them up real thin. Then you can taste all different flavors and you won't go so deep into the potency. So
There you go. I'll get a little truffle shaver and I'll just stand over you with your mouth open, just blah 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 blah. Okay,
Oh my God, that sounds
all right.
delightful.
Let's
Count
let's
me
set
in.
it up. Well, very good, man.
Wow.
Seems like you're still pretty tied to the plant as well. Are you growing any this year in your backyard, or are you just leaving that to everyone else since everyone else is growing weed down there?
Yeah, I am taking, I don't want to say I'm retired. I'm way too young to be retired from anything, but I'm taking some time off from growing and focusing on the chocolatiering, and that's been awesome. So definitely still learning a lot, because growing, it's like every day you're learning something, because the plants, require so much care and are affected so much by everything. But um, yeah, I mean, also coming back to kind of listen to your podcast with the regards to the plant, I feel like I've fallen a little bit out of touch with the plant. I'm seeing a lot of the end result now with rosin, but that led me to like picking out specific podcasts of yours and just hearing your expertise in like the flavor chart. Am I correct in the terminology that you guys made that?
We're calling it an aroma
An
wheel.
aroma wheel,
Yes.
excuse me.
Yes.
The aroma wheel. So yeah, and that led me to dig up some test results, because I've been largely going off of smell and group consensus here as to what we're infusing with what truffle flavors. And literally this morning, I started printing out like our terpene results from a lot of these rosins going into the truffles. And that's why I brought up the cake strains going with blueberry, because I saw both grape cream cake and birthday cake have similar terpene profile with less myrcene in it than humulene and caryophyllene.
Yeah,
So, whereas you'll see the myrcene in a lot of the other more indica strains we use. And so that's an example of where, like, I personally, being the one that poured the rosin into that coconut oil, I hadn't taken the time at that point, or the correlation, you know, in my daily activities to see how those two were related terpene profile. We're just going on what we know should go in there. Not to say that someone else in our team hadn't looked at that and made that decision, but as a,
Takes a village for sure.
yeah, someone out there thinking ahead of me, but they're putting me to the task here. And I'm like, learning through you guys topics of like, oh, it's not just terpenes, there's also flavor profiles. And now I just learned today from one of our teammates here about the sulfurs in Tropicana cookies,
Each
for
the
instance. Like, it's a
Tropicana sulfurs.
sulfur
Yep.
thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm like, so this podcast has been a catalyst for me to hone in a little bit more on why we've been choosing the flavors that are going in and whatnot.
Yeah, you should. If you haven't heard it yet, our episode on Tropicana sulfurs is actually quite thorough. And we ended it by talking about some of the other, what is being called flavorants that are part of that category. So they found like honey and banana are two sort of ester family compounds. Coconut was another one that was discovered. So there's like,
Right.
yeah, there's like a whole new world that's about to explode when it comes to talking about smell and flavor and those molecules that overlap in cannabis. Like we're on the cusp of like a waterfall of information that's about to come out about all of
That
it.
is
So
exciting.
it may influence your work, but I feel like what I'm hearing is what you're going to find is you're already doing it. It's just now you have this name for it. Now you can name it, right? Like this compound is the reason these two, this cake and this work so well together. It's that 0.003% coconut. It's like this little something in
Yeah.
there that's really tying it all together. But it's intuitive,
Right.
right? 'Cause you're gonna smell it, you're gonna taste it, and you're gonna be like, this is the one.
Right. Because that's where we all started, was intuition.
Yeah.
We're like, we like
yeah,
that.
yes.
What was
You
that?
do have to trust your nose in all of this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many bunk edibles out there that just taste like whatever they could put into it. And so I think that's one of the things that's really hard to replicate what you guys are doing is like, hey, someone's like educated who knows what good flower is, knows what good rosin is, has like a profile that they are intending for, can then get your nose in some jars and line it up and make it work. So few other places have that luxury because they're just taking jar of oil A21 off and measuring 23 grams out,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very tasty.
Yeah, it really is, right?
It's still evolving. It's like this plant just pushes all of us that trust to listen to it from growing on up to putting it in some truffles like this. It's like with the rosin inputs, we're still evolving with what the plant is kind of telling us to do in that aspect as well. In that now that we've had the opportunity to taste so many different strain profiles in these different truffle flavors and whatnot, it's again, this might sound like over the top or something to some listeners at first, but bear with us that by the nature of how tasty these truffles are coming out and the effects and the state of the industry, keep in mind that the BNK team has a small tier 2 outdoor grow that's all in-house. So it's nothing huge by any means. It's what it should be in terms of size and therefore quality of attention and output. But there's still been enough yield for certain products that we're able to use the 73 through 149 micron for pretty much all of the edibles. So we're using essentially smokable hash. And that's just that, those profiles of this rosin just calling us in to like, yeah, you could use, the 70U. Like we don't go down to the 40 micron lower quality hash, but even dipping down below that smokable quality, there's opportunity for us to put in the highest possible inputs, not as a show off thing by any means, but just it's become irresistible to taste this quality in the truffle if and when it's available. So it still continues to be a journey of like, what is happening as, we make these of like, I can't believe that we all survived all these shakeouts and that the attention to detail and not going too big, too fast is panning out to continue to evolve this product even. At times it feels like we must have hit like the threshold of quality or possibility, but I think it's going to keep evolving, believe it or not.
I'm a believer.
Yeah. So, is there any flavors that are missing in your Rolodex? Like, if I've got a pack of seeds here, and one of these is going to taste like melon or Cracker Jacks, or what would be your dream strain for making edibles?
Yeah, something. I think a blueberry would be
Sure.
in there because of the blueberry. While I've been hyping it up as pairing up with the cakey strains, but the blueberry, as I mentioned, was a bow flavor. He wanted the blueberry. We've seen vanilla hazelnut from Fidus and the Loud 100. We've seen biscuits and gravy from Trap Kitchen, and largely blueberry was Bo having ideas with strains to pair up in there. But as you may be aware, blueberry is a tough one to pull out of the cannabis plant in a perfect manner or a worthy manner for where blueberry started, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And hey, the old Oregon DJ Short blueberry that we're all very familiar with is very tasty, but it doesn't really taste like a blueberry dessert. So hey, we could get there.
Exactly.
Now I've got my eye
It's
out.
a nuanced flavor.
Oh, that sounds delicious. I'd like to, if we're taking requests, I feel like in that blue vein, I don't know if you've ever tried like a violet syrup, because it's kind of grapey, kind of berry, but it's also like that floral of eating a flower, So if we're if we're making requests over here, I'm just gonna just throw that one in the mix. I'll be in Oregon in a few months if you needed a timeline as well.
It might be your next visit after that. but we'll be working on it.
Listen, if we're shaving chocolate and we're like, count me in, I'll be there for sure. But I do like a good flower plum berry family flavors.
I'm
So
writing it down, Amanda.
nice. Okay.
We're gonna bribe you. I sent both of you a message during the podcast. We're gonna send you over a digital version of the wheel so you can dig into that and print it
Great.
out or whatever.
Hanging on our wall here in the kitchen.
Whatever's easy for
Hell
you
yeah.
guys. Share it with whoever it makes sense. And so, hey, we'll shout that out here at the end of the show. But if there's anything that you wanted to call attention to, or anything that we should keep an eye out for besides that coffee flavor, which we're going to be drooling over until it comes out 8 months from now, yeah, anything you want to shout out?
Absolutely. I should certainly last shout out to folks we still don't know, but the cacao farmers that we largely supply from are based in Peru and Dominican Republic. And I will say it's a dream of mine and some other folks on the team to take that jump and go to the source. We are getting the chocolate from single source cacao farms that fall under fair trade certification and organic and such. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be meeting these folks in person, being that, we're cannabis farmers ourselves. That's one of the missing components that, I think about all the time. Anytime I start to melt some chocolate or throughout the day, it's just like, what a magical opportunity to work with such high quality chocolate. And I don't know enough about the process, even like how much cacao bean is needed to get to the end product of what I see as a finished chocolate that I melt down. But the big shout out there for the future and for the now of the cacao farmers that have made this possible as well.
That is so cool that you guys are getting it from single farms. That's the way to do it. I was wanted to ask. I was nervous to ask because you just don't know, but that is so fantastic.
And it is sourced from
Wow.
a global manufacturer in France, but it is known what farms they're from, and it's a specific cacao farm, and it has traceability and sustainable co-development. And we all know that those words only go so far. However, at this stage in what we do, we definitely use what we use to have as positive as an impact as possible using cacao, knowing its history.
All right, next stop, Peru, baby. Let's go.
I know, I'm going to have to. If you could get down there and let us know what's up.
Do not challenge Amanda. She will walk down there with a refrigerated fanny pack full of truffles.
Well, I'm putting that challenge out there. I feel like I've gotten some good ones from you two today. So let's keep it going. That's how we make the magic happen,
I'm down. Let's do it. I'll bring some truffles to your farmers. Let's fucking do it. I'm sure they'd love it. How fun would that be, though? Because I think you're right. I know we're wrapping up here, but we're working in an agricultural industry, and these folks are also working in an agricultural industry, and there is a mutual understanding of the volume of work. And I also don't know what it takes to harvest cacao, but I know what it takes to harvest cannabis and process it. And I imagine they're equally as challenging when it comes to precision and being delicate and understanding the little subtle details. Like we're not picking tomatoes here. These are both really intense crops. They're luxury products. And so how fun would it be to do a nice little crossover? That's very cool. Love that.
Yeah. It's overdue for us coming into 10 years of doing this. It is something that is a dream of mine to know the people that are helping make this happen on that end, for sure. It's just so labor intensive, like you're saying, Amanda. Like we spend as kitchen staff, and we'll spend the harvest out at the farm with Bo and his farm team. Shout out Tyler and Bo. But man, I have to gear up for those 3 weeks to 4 weeks. Like, I know what's coming, and it's just another day at work for those guys, but it's a very labor intensive, also mind focus. So we know that's going on for sure on any cacao farm, I can only imagine. So it's pretty cool to share that, though, that understanding and that experience on some level.
Yeah.
Well, that's the best shout out we've had on the show. If you need any of the clickable stuff, Instagram things, websites, we'll put that all in the details of the show and on the Instagram post. So Crop Circle is going to be really easy to find, and they're pretty easy to find here in Oregon. They're in all of the quality stores here in Oregon. So if you know of a dispensary that tends to have like a slightly more educated bud tender, there's a good chance that's where you're going to find it. So head on in. I really like the whole line. I go for the yuzu. That's my number one favorite. So
Nice.
keep your eyes out.
That's a chef's favorite too.
I think that if you haven't tried them yet, you're going to have a new favorite.
Thanks for being on the show today. It was really lovely to meet you and chat about your fantastic products.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Ryan.
Let's keep the conversation going.
Follow us on Instagram at the.smokingspot. And if you've stuck around this long, rate us 5 stars.
And don't forget to subscribe to get the first updates on future episodes.
Said no matter what kind of pain and anguish life may bring you, oh, smoke it up, hold it down, and don't ever stop. Well, you can always find your smoking spot. Yeah, you can always find your smoking spot.
Hey, Smoking Spot fans. We're here to tell you about the newest launch from Centelligence Projects.
Over the last year, we've created the Cannabis Aroma Wheel. It's a sensory tool designed to help connoisseurs take their knowledge to the next level. So whether you're a bud tender, dispensary owner, cultivator, or you just love the smell of weed, you can better appreciate the cannabis in front of you.
Get your copy of the most detailed sensory tool built specifically for the cannabis industry and order your Cannabis Aroma Wheel today at centelligenceproject.com.